Welcome to this in depth lesson on the obligation, a fundamental pillar of civil law. Understanding its dynamics is essential for students, professionals, and anyone wishing to navigate the complex world of legal relationships. Together, we will analyze its constituent elements, the methods of termination, and the consequences of non compliance. The obligatory relationship governs legal interactions between parties, establishing mutual rights and duties. At its core are always two main figures, the debtor and the creditor. The debtor is required to perform a specific service, while the creditor is the beneficiary of that service. This structure forms the core of civil law, regulating a wide range of everyday situations. It is through obligations that the circulation of wealth occurs within a society. They promote cooperation between individuals, enabling exchanges and agreements based on trust and responsibility. The obligation is structured around three essential elements, the coexistence of which is essential for its existence and validity. These elements are the subjects, the object, and the performance. Let's analyze them in detail to grasp their structural importance. The first element is represented by the parties to the obligation. On one side, we have the creditor, who is the holder of the credit right or the legally protected claim for performance. On the other, we have the debtor, the person burdened by the obligation to perform the obligation for the creditor's benefit. The second element is the object of the obligation, which can be interpreted in two distinct ways. It can refer to the thing on which the performance is based, such as a specific good to be delivered, or it can indicate the conduct the debtor is required to adopt, regardless of the material good. The third and crucial element is the performance or the activity the debtor must perform. The primary purpose of the performance is to satisfy the creditor's interest, which may be pecuniary or non pecuniary. Its performance is the heart of the obligation itself. Types of performance are traditionally classified into three main categories. Performances of giving involve the transfer of ownership of an asset or the delivery of a specific item. A classic example is the sale of a property or the delivery of goods. Performance obligations, on the other hand, require the debtor to perform a specific activity. This may include the creation of a work, the provision of a professional service, or the execution of manual labor. Consider, for example, a lawyer's obligation to defend his client. Finally, refrain obligations require the debtor to refrain from a certain behavior. This is a negative obligation, like a non compete agreement or a commitment not to disclose confidential information. In these cases, the creditor's interest is satisfied precisely by the debtor's inaction. Fulfillment represents the natural and physiological extinction of the obligation, its ideal fulfillment. It occurs when the debtor accurately performs the due performance, terminating the legal obligation. Fulfillment is the ultimate goal of every obligatory relationship. To be considered valid and effective, performance must be performed correctly. This means that the debtor must scrupulously adhere to the established procedures for performance. Any deviation from the agreed terms may compromise the validity of the performance. Compliance with the established deadlines for performance is also essential. Late performance, even if complete, may constitute a breach or default on the part of the debtor. Punctuality is a crucial aspect of proper performance. Likewise, compliance with the place established for performance is an essential requirement. The performance must be performed at the agreed upon location or, in the absence of an agreement, at the location determined by law. Performance at a different location may not satisfy the creditor's interests. Fulfillment produces two fundamental legal effects. The first is the debtor's release from the obligation. Once the obligation has been properly performed, the debtor no longer has any obligation towards the creditor. The second effect is the satisfaction of the creditor's interest. The performance of the obligation fully fulfills the creditor's expectation as he receives what was owed to him. This restores the legal balance and concludes the relationship. Non-performance occurs when the debtor fails to perform the due performance, violating their obligation. This situation represents a pathology of the contractual relationship, disrupting its proper functioning. Non-performance can take various forms. A breach of contract also occurs when the performance is performed incorrectly, not in accordance with the agreements or the rules of the art. Partial, defective, or non-compliant performance is equivalent to a failure to perform. Another form of non-performance is late performance. Even if the performance is actually performed, the delay can cause damage to the creditor and alter the balance of the relationship. Time is often of the essence of the obligation. The primary consequence of non-performance is that the debtor is held liable. This liability, whether contractual or non-contractual depending on the source of the obligation, requires the debtor to be held accountable for his or her actions. The law provides specific exemptions, but the general rule is liability. The debtor's liability translates into the obligation to compensate the creditor for the damages suffered. Compensation serves to restore the creditor's assets, placing them in the same situation they would have been in had the obligation been fulfilled correctly. The scope of compensation includes both actual damages, i.e., the loss suffered, and lost profits, i.e., the lost earnings. Both must be an immediate and direct consequence of the breach. Quantifying damages is a crucial aspect of the compensation process. An important concept related to late payment is default. Default is a definition of qualified delay, which occurs when the debtor is formally placed in default by the creditor or when the delay occurs automatically under certain circumstances. Not every delay constitutes default. The effects of default entail specific and aggravating consequences for the debtor. Among these, the risk of supervening impossibility of performance passes to the debtor, even if not attributable to his or her fault. Default aggravates the debtor's position. A typical example of the effect of late payment is the payment of default interest on the sums owed. This interest, which can be statutory or conventional, represents a form of compensation for late payment. It accrues from the date of default. To ensure performance and protect the creditor, the legal system provides various guarantees. These guarantees aim to strengthen the creditor's position, offering greater certainty of satisfaction of their debt. They are mainly divided into real guarantees and personal guarantees. Collateral grants the creditor a right to one or more specific assets of the debtor or a third party. In the event of default, the creditor can seek satisfaction from these assets preferentially over other creditors. They are very strong guarantees by their very nature. Among real guarantees, we find the pledge, which concerns movable property, credits, or other rights on movable property. The pledge is established by the delivery of the asset to the creditor or a designated third party. It grants the creditor the right to satisfaction on the asset with preference. The pledgee has the right to sell the asset in the event of default and to withdraw the proceeds up to the amount of his claim. This right of first refusal is a distinctive feature of a pledge. A pledge is a very effective security for movable property. A mortgage is another form of real estate security, which involves real estate or registered personal property. It is established by registration in public registries, thereby publicizing the lien. A mortgage does not entail dispossession of the property. A mortgage also gives the creditor the right to satisfaction on the mortgaged property with preference over other creditors. In the event of default, the creditor can initiate the forced sale of the property. Mortgages are widely used in real estate financing. Personal guarantees, unlike real guarantees, do not bind a specific asset. They consist of a third party's commitment to cover the debtor's obligation with their own assets. Liability extends to the guarantor's entire assets. A surety bond is the most common form of personal guarantee. A third party, the guarantor, personally undertakes to guarantee the performance of another's obligation to the creditor. The guarantor is liable with all his or her present and future assets. The guarantor intervenes in the event of the principal debtor's default, assuming the obligation to pay. Their obligation is ancillary to the principal one, but their assets are directly exposed. Suretyship is often required for loans and contracts. The general purpose of guarantees is twofold. On the one hand, they strengthen the creditor's position, offering them a greater chance of recovering their debt. This increases trust in economic and legal transactions. On the other hand, guarantees incentivize debtors to meet their obligations, as they know they have an additional incentive to honor their commitments. The presence of a guarantee can make it easier to obtain credit or enter into contracts. In short, the obligation is a complex but fundamental mechanism for the functioning of law and society. A proper understanding of it is essential for anyone working in the legal field or managing contractual relationships.